people to perform.
Mm.
If you're going to do it as a carrot and a stick type of behavior, or doing it with compassion, kindness, and helping humanity, because then that humanity will turn back and say, you know what, the company cares about me, therefore I'm going to care for the company.
Welcome to Share.care, an all-inclusive community sharing experience, strength, and hope to create strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships. Share.care communities work toward every individual feeling safe, valued, and heard, free from the threat of danger, pain, or harm. Each episode, founder Damian Andrews explores the principles underpinning Share.care and invites expert special guests to share their knowledge so you can easily reap the benefits so many others experience. You hold the choice to create your future. Let it be with strong, healthy, and inspiring relationships.
We're a professional organization here. We've got takes now. Professional filming. Hello and welcome to Share.care podcast. Our belief is that global peace starts at home. Feeling safe, valued, and heard gives you a foundation to confidently step out and make the world a happier and safer place for everyone. Because in today's world, it's in your own interest to help others. And today it is my wonderful and great pleasure to have back Yvette Durazo. Now, Yvette was the youngest of 7 children, which instantly made her an expert negotiator. She then went on to work as an adjunct professor at the University of California, and she's the founder and principal consultant at Unitive Consultive. Plus, she's the author of the Conflict Intelligent Quotient, Conflict IQ, the missing piece to turbocharge conscious leaders and organizations' emotional intelligence, which is a topic of today's episode. We're going to delve deep into this book. Yvette, pleasure to have you on the show again.
Thank you, Diamond, for inviting me again. My pleasure.
Yeah, it's wonderful. I've been excited about this as well because your book you've gone into so much detail, but in a way that, for me anyway, makes sense. And I think to a lot of people it makes sense. You look at the conflict from the perspective of an emotional intelligence point of things. Do you want to just we'll step back a little bit, and can you give us a little bit of summary of what the book is about and why you wrote the book?
Yes, I wrote the book for many reasons. First, like you said, I was born from a big family of 7 children. And little that I realized until I was growing up and I got my degree, that I was really already equipped to do mediation and negotiation because of that. The other thing that inspired me is the experience that I had with my own father, who was an orphan at the age of 7, never had any formal education. And he was a great businessman that he was very kind and supported with their employees. And just experiencing that those employees will support, protect, and be very loyal to the company of my father. And then me going into the workplace and experiencing bad bosses. That's where I got the distinction as to how can we create more of these leaders like my father that didn't have any education, any university education, but have that ability to treat people with respect. And it worked. He was doing well in business. He was doing well in the community. He was doing well with the employees. So that caught my attention. And I said, what can I do to contribute with my education, with my experiences that I have had of my own and that of my father? And how can I inspire organizations to develop more of these type of leaders? So that's the reason behind this book.
And from that perspective, I mean, watching your father work, I mean, because what you're saying there sounds like common sense. Well, to me, it sounds like common sense is, kind, supportive, respect people. And where do you think it went wrong with leadership where people, I mean, even when you look at history, you think of I think of King Arthur, because at Share.care we have the code and we have the Knights, which is based on the Knights Code, and there was people listening. I remember reading about Nelson Mandela. His father, I believe, was a tribal leader, and when they had meetings, he would go around the room and listen to everybody else first before he spoke. So where do you think we went wrong with the leaders that aren't kind, supportive, and respectful?
Well, I think, that we were wrong when organization trusted very strong consulting companies that were doing research. McKinsey and Company, it's one of them that put out a research many years ago. And the research was more about making a lot of emphasis in performance.
Right.
And everybody bought into the idea about performance. And then now we're starting to see the effects of what a performance-driven society looks like. And it is not what we want to look for. We're looking at people performing at any given cost. We're not only seeing it at the university levels, we're seeing it in the corporate level, that it creates a lot of level of tension, of anxiety, and people are pushing and pushing and pushing for performance no matter what, at any given cost.
Yeah.
To the point that performance became more important than somebody being trustworthy. And that really, at the end of the day, does not stick, right? Why? Because you can get people to perform if you're gonna do it as a carrot and a stick type of behavior, or doing it with compassion, kindness, and helping humanity, because then that humanity will turn back and say, you know what, the company cares about me, therefore I'm going to care for the company. We have been building a society that it is Darwinism type of mentality. It's the strongest of the fittest is the one that it's going to survive. You win at all costs. It is all about competition. And we realized that in the past 4 years that we have been dealing with all the pandemic, social injustice, and all the trauma that all of these have caused, and all these political division, that humanity in the workplace needs more than just being told what to do, policies and procedures. We experienced that indeed, as much as companies wanted to divide, personal life and professional life just to hold on to performance, we realized that could not be so because of all that we were dealing with. And just the fact that by force, the companies have to become more flexible with employees, then that's when they get to experience that the employees will be more grateful if they were to have particular flexibility to be able to pick up the children from school, be able to attend to the family, and then do the work later on in the afternoon. Therefore, then the employees would be more loyal to the company, right? And in employers that are not following that, then people realize that, you know what, I can look for other jobs. The reality that we have been bought into thinking that we need to ascend in an organization and be order to be, career driven and have all these positions based on what people experience, being in situations where, it is, you get sick, you get the virus, you can easily die. People have the opportunity to retrospect and say, you know what, the career is not more important than my family. The career is not more important than my health. The career is not important than what I need as a human being. So that changed the narrative of what individuals are asking for organizations. And following that type of leadership, that leaders are not caring for people, they're only caring for profit, it's not working anymore. And yes, I know that right now we're dealing with another tragic situation about the economical turnout, and that is making people being forced back into the back norms of how companies used to run organizations. But yet individuals evolved and realized and woke up to the hypnosis of only working towards performance.
Was part of that contributed by the demographics at the time? Because when we look at supply and demand economics, you have the baby boomers entering the workforce. Roughly, I think around the 60s and 70s would have been roughly when because after World War II, so the 50s, people started having lots of children, and so they're entering the workforce, say in the 60s and 70s through to the 80s. So there's an abundance of employees, and if someone doesn't perform, you can quickly get rid of them and get someone else because there's so much supply as far as employees go. But today, all those boomers are retiring and we don't have the numbers of people to replace them. So it's become, and it certainly showed after the pandemic, where people went, where's all the workforce gone? People realized they could do something different and they went, I don't have to go back to this. So is that part of that, from that one of the reasons of going, I didn't have to worry about employees. I'm speaking, globally here as an organization. They didn't have to worry about employees because you could always hire someone new because there was an abundance. But now, especially if you're looking for quality employees, that there's a scarcity out there and it's difficult to find, and that you need a different approach. Is that part of the reason you think that we're in this situation now?
I think so, because once again, baby boomers realize that, they have, they might either have the amount of money to retire, or they might have an amount of money to retire elsewhere outside of the United States, and where their money can go a longer way. And the quality of life, it's better. The quality of life is, you're living closer to the beach and it's going to cost you a quarter of what it will cost you just to rent any place or buy a house anywhere in the United States. Foods are less expensive elsewhere. The quality, the cleanliness of the foods are way cleaner in other parts of the world. So, a lot of people move around and decided that, the hypnosis idea about that I have to retire in the United States, it doesn't have to be so. I don't like what's going on with politics. I don't like what's going on with all the social justice thing. It is time for me to move out of the entire country. So people are mobilizing all over. That's why we're seeing and continue to see a whole bunch of companies, buildings that are empty, because now the companies are having difficulty bringing people back into companies to work.
That's an interesting point you mentioned, because I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. As certainly here in Australia, it's the same situation. I don't know that the politics are as polarizing as you have in America, but maybe that could be sensationalized by the news because I'm not there. Unfortunately, fortunately, I've been to 44 countries. Unfortunately, I haven't been to America yet, and which is kind of weird because I'm a massive NASCAR fan. So I'm looking forward to getting there one day. But from that perspective, I hadn't thought about it, in that aspect as well. When you look at from that dynamic, and I do know, and should have, because I've been to all these countries where you're right. There's so many amazing places that you can live, that are much cheaper. Yes, they have the same high standard as we have as far as food and access to water and living, but it's just massively cheaper. And there's really, really beautiful places as well. Yeah, you can buy a nice place on the beach or a nice place, in the hills or something like that, and you have all the same amenities. Interesting point. From that perspective, let's delve into the book now, and we talk about, and thank you, you've provided some a run sheet for me as well. Did my homework, but I'm going to take your homework, if we can go with that. But you talked about,
Sure.
let's work through the conflict side of things, because it applies both to in the workplace when we're dealing with people. But it also applies at home and in the relationships we have with both, it might be in a club that you have, so part of that organization. The principles apply the same. If I'm not misunderstanding.
Definitely. When I studied this field of work, alternative dispute resolution, and I wanted to teach individuals just to become more peaceful, more conflict intelligent. People were not hearing, because it is very difficult for somebody to change
Mm-hmm.
until it costs you something.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought going into organizations and offering this as a leeway, as raising performance, creating better culture, I might run with more opportunities to go in and do the work. Therefore, as they're learning these techniques and they're awakening and they're becoming more aware of this, therefore they're going to become better society members, better parents, better family members, better community members.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely anything that has to do with human and how to relate to human, it is transferable. You can use it anywhere, in your job, in your career, in those organizations that you are a board member of, and in your home. And that is the idea, that conflict intelligence is not about a technique or something just to give you that it will work on one specific thing. It's more about helping you to understand how to become it, how to be comfortable, because people are very afraid of conflict. It is being said that between public speaking and conflict, it is probably the most fearful thing that people have. A lot of people fear public speaking. A
Yes.
lot of people fear, being in a situation and where they have to negotiate and they have to resolve or deal with conflict. People are very fearful. And the idea is to normalize it and bring it to their awareness that by understanding how to deal with that type of uncomfortableness around it, you not only become a better leader, you become somebody that people want to follow, because you have something that others might not have, that you don't run away from situations or difficult situations. You're there, you're giving the face, because you are able to be in a state of adversity and still be able to lead others, or still be able to take care of maneuvering the situation in ways that you're able to make an impact, lead, and do things that will, make progress on situations and things and people.
So what it sounds like there is you're taking a proactive role in recognizing the situations that lead to conflict, and we were talking in the pre-show about this, but I'm going to quote my mum here, where she said, "It takes two to tango. You can't argue with someone that doesn't argue." Is part of this process as well identifying the role that you're playing in escalating the conflict?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I also say in my book that not all the conflict can be resolved, but it can be managed. If you're going to have somebody that is not very rational on the other side, and it's very angry, and it's very fixed mindset,
Yes.
you're not going to be able to resolve the issue with the other person, but yet you're able to manage it, therefore preserve your health, Therefore,
Mhm.
at the end of the day, preserve your health, preserve your mental well-being, right?
Mhm.
And be able to maneuver situations and make changes in life in order to be able to, live better,
Mm.
right?
I think that's
Because
a mission.
obviously you cannot force other people to resolve issues, right?
Yes.
Because like you said, it takes two to tango. But I also explained that not necessarily it takes two to tango. It takes one person to be able to recognize that,
Mm.
perhaps it is not even worth it being in an argument with this other person, or perhaps it's not even worth it fighting for whatever it's happening in there, because what is more worth it to you? Your own peace, your own well-being?
Mm.
Where do you put that energy? Can you put it more towards, developing something greater, that it's greater than you, that you're helping society, or just arguing with people?
Because it's
And that
interesting.
could be at work, that could be at home.
Yeah, definitely. And I think from that perspective as well, from my experience anyway, watching, debates. I don't like debates anymore. Used to, I think it's lost its purpose. A debate, I think originally was about, learning and growing and seeing other people's points of view. But now it seems to be debates are more about it, or I view it as two narcissists beating each other over the head with their own opinion, and no one's listening anymore. From what I'm hearing from what you're talking about there, part of what this process is of conflict IQ is you having the IQ to recognize that role that you're playing within that and recognize the situation as well, because there's certain people, as you said, you're just not going to be able to resolve a situation with, and sometimes it's better just to go, I'm not never that's we're going to, we might not even agree to disagree, but I'm recognizing that the disagreement is going to continue. So I'm going to adjust what I'm doing for, my own well-being, but also too, it gives you the opportunity to try a different approach, I would imagine.
Exactly. And and it is not necessarily, the idea about uh, intelligence. Intelligence is only relevant to our level of consciousness. you
Mm.
know we realize nowadays that intelligence is not what we were meant to believe, that there was this test that you can measure intelligence.
Yes.
That was another lie
Yeah.
that we bought into society, thinking that, you know if you don't apply to whatever the school teaches you, and then you
Mm.
get good grades, then you're not intelligent.
Mm.
That the mold was broke, because all of a sudden we had people that never went to school and are very good, strong entrepreneurs.
Mm.
We have people that never went to school, higher education, and they're genius.
Yeah.
So intelligence is only relevant to many things that you can um, that you can become aware of, and be able to be good at. Like for example, people with dyslexia, back in the days, I'm dyslexic,
Mm.
I had ADD. Back in the days, we were considered that we were learning disabled.
Mm.
Thank God that I went and did my degree. It cost me a lot to get my degree,
Yeah.
but then my son also had that same issue. He
Mm.
wasn't doing well in school, but he was extremely smart.
Yes.
And I was able to change his paradigm with that and say, you know what? The intelligence that is measured in the school,
Mm.
it's, even though that it's a big institution and everybody has to fall for it, does not define you.
Mm.
Because let me show you, there's a whole list of people that have been doing successfully. These are the people that are in the news because we know about them. But imagine all of these other great people that are not in the news, they're not in a website, that are doing great things in society and inventing things and building things and doing great things that had difficulty going to school. So that does not define intelligence for me.
Yes.
Because, I went through an entire school educational system in thinking that it was because I was bilingual and because my first language was Spanish, I was having difficulty. Until later in life, I realized that I had dyslexia and ADD.
Yeah.
And that, okay, it makes sense. But like I said, it didn't stop me from getting a bachelor's degree. It didn't stop me from getting a master's degree. It didn't stop me from, having an 11-page CV.
Yeah.
Right? It didn't stop me. So, and then we see, greater examples, like Elon Musk or, all of these, great inventors and business people that have been doing great things without having, I'm not saying that education is not good. What I'm saying is that, the intelligence is very limited if you want to define it through what they have made us believe that is intelligent.
Oh,
And
I was going to say you're exactly
intelligence
right,
is,
because Einstein
yeah,
failed school as well. He flunked out of school. He was pretty smart.
exactly. But then he realized that by understanding levels of consciousness that everybody has,
Yes.
that is where the intelligence falls into. And actually, it was through Albert Einstein's. That was the first quote that I can say that my book it's fully lion.
Yeah.
You cannot resolve a conflict at the level of conscious that it was created, because at that level of conscious it's locked down.
Yeah.
Right? You need to start asking questions. You need to start seeing things from different lens. You were talking about debates and that you don't enjoy debates anymore because nobody's teaching us how to have good quality professional debates. What we see in our news, it's everybody fighting each other, not being respectful to others based on their opinions, right?
Is
It
that
is just fighting each other.
because obviously having those fights and debates and pushing buttons is highly emotional. It certainly elicits a highly emotional response. And I liken that to, I remember years ago when I was living in Perth and my girlfriend lived north of where I was and had to drive up the coast road, which was a beautiful road, but it had lots of traffic lights. And when you want to go and see your partner because, you're excited, every red traffic light's really, really frustrating. And so I was thinking I was getting all the red lights and going, it's so frustrating getting all these red lights, but being, I don't know if I'm anally retentive or whatever, but I decided to count all of the different lights. I had a notebook and every time I went through a traffic light, I ticked whether it was green or red. Yeah, it's really sad, but I did this. And then when I looked at it very quickly, I noticed there was so many more green lights, but I was focusing on the red ones because they're emotionally stimulating. And is that part of where we've headed to when you're talking about the debates there, that it's become because let's blame Ron Burgundy from that news show, I can't remember what it's called, The Anchorman, where he started to notice, if people are reacting emotionally, they'll tune in more. Is part of that and how do we step above that to actually go, well, hang on, other than turning the news off, which is what I did. But
the thing is that, first of all, now that we have the AI helping us, right? Unfortunately and unfortunately, we have humongous companies like Google, which is humongous companies, that they know better of how the humanity functions. Therefore, they're creating all this technology, right?
Yeah.
But it's not only them. There's a whole bunch of companies that literally they have figured out through technology to follow us. People know, these technologies know at what time one individual start looking at Instagram, Facebook, at what hour of the day, who you are, what is your, they know so much detail about you that it is very difficult for humans not to be in a state of where news, everything that is going around will not push your buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is as the technology knows more than you do as a human being. What I'm inviting you to do here in this book is self-mastery, which is key to create awareness. And I'm not talking about just the regular type of awareness. It's really identifying what is your makeup from the level of where you were born up until now, in order to understand yourself and understand what are your triggers.
Yeah.
Right. And then decide from there, is that the way that I want to continue reacting to the outside world? When you decide, no, that is not what I want, then that is what I call retooling the brain, is helping you to retool the brain, and not specifically on what they have teach us about conflict resolution. It's about something more practical, that it is more practical in the aspect that you would understand it so well that it becomes part of your ways of being, you know? And then there are people that are very hardwired with anger, very hardwired with ways of thinking. And that is where I talk about, okay, let's now help you to transform your behavior, so that when you have all these three things, you have the ability that if you're in a high stakes situation, you're going to be able to respond in the most useful way for you and the other person, or you or the other people.
So from it, when you're talking about responding in a more effective way, and I'm linking that to what you were talking about with the social media that supposedly knows what you want. My experience is slightly different, whereas I've actually got to actively go and look for the things that I want to watch. On YouTube here, it's quite prolific that I found that it was feeding me a bunch of stuff from the same organizations, but I didn't want that. There's a number, but it kept feeding it. And there was places that I went to, and I actually have to go and find those, and I have to take the effort to do that. Is that part of that as well, where it's, and I know, admit, I like to be lazy as well, because it's just easier. But is that part of what we need to do in dealing with the conflict IQ, is actually take that little bit of effort to go recognize and then make that part of a habit, and then it becomes natural and it becomes a transition?
Well, basically your personality is a repetitive behavior that you have been doing for years and years and years. I have a saying that I said, don't take your personality really seriously. Just like the saying that says, don't take yourself so seriously.
Yeah.
Don't take your personality so seriously, because you think that you're your personality, because those are the behaviors that you're used to doing for many decades.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you cannot change that. You can.
Yes. So
when I was 20 years ago, if you were to test me on a personality test, I would be an extremely extroverted person. Now I'm a hybrid.
Okay.
Because of the work that I do. Eventually the work that I do, I have to be sitting down, mediating people, being there present, listening to people, being quiet more, all that stuff. So people think that they're their personality, that they're never gonna change. Right? But it is not true. When you understand that there's certain behaviors that might have served you very well when you were growing up, but perhaps now they're not serving you the best. And then you start seeing through those lens of what is it that you're creating based on those behaviors. Then you get to have the opportunity to make the choice and say, you know what, I don't like that. I don't like the impact that I'm generating outside. I don't like the impact of me getting so angry that my employees will be afraid of me. I don't like the impact that my coworker sees that I get so angry, and therefore they're afraid of me instead of working with me.
Yeah. How much of that, because I find that people tend to go through this traumatic experience to get to that point where they recognize they can change. Is part of that, again, being able to listen that there is an alternative out there, and we get stuck in this, that, as you say, you believe in your own personality. This is who I am. I remember someone they were talking about an Italian waiter that was always getting upset, and then he goes, and they asked him, "Why are you getting upset?" And he goes, "Well, what do you expect from me? I'm Italian." And it's is it from that perspective that, as you say, we get caught up in our personality thinking that is the truth, but when it becomes so painful, we start to then look beyond that. Is that part of that awakening?
Well, yeah, individuals have different reasons and different ways of why they seek to change or transform.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is because it's painful. It's very painful. And something happens, maybe you lost your job several times because of the way that you react. It could be because you're losing a lot of money. You probably are that type of person that get divorced every single time you get married. Well, it's costing you a lot of money, right? Or it's
Zsa Zsa
costing you a lot of money. Yeah.
I love the quote from Zsa Zsa Gabor. She said, "I'm a great housekeeper. Every time I get divorced, I keep the house."
There you go. So, or it could be because you're losing an opportunity to go to the next level in your career because your supervisor, your managers are saying, "We cannot get you to the next level because you're not treating people well. People don't like to work with you." And then you're losing the opportunity to go to the next level and losing money out of that career because you're not getting to the next level. It could be that people get inspired, people shift and get inspired by someone, and they see, wow, I want to be like that person. It happened to me when I was very young. I never knew this person. I don't even remember the name. It was somebody that came as a speaker to one of my classes where I got so inspired by that person that I said, I want to be that. I want to be a person that just by walking into a classroom, I can inspire others to be peaceful, to be calm and collected. And that inspired me. And then I got a whole bunch of experiences that led me to be in a state of peace. Now people come to me and it's like, wow, you inspire so much peace when I'm around you. And it was based on an experience that I had that person inspired me, right? It could be also that people are in a space of learning, and the learning is coming through the right channels, and then people are learning, and then they shift, right?
Yeah.
So those are the many reasons or the many ways in how people can change or transform. And it is not only because they're losing something, but it could be all of that.
Yeah. So let's move to the more detail in the book. One of the things I noticed in your book, and you wrote about, is you wrote that people skills are not soft skills. Do you want to explain the difference between the two? Could you do that?
Yeah, definitely. And I put these what is it, a butter? Melting. Well, back in the days, companies didn't want anything to do with people skills. Like people skills, it's not important here.
Yeah.
It's all about hard skill. It's all about performance. It's all about hard skill.
Yeah.
We want hard skills in order for people to perform, right? And it wasn't until people were getting to the higher levels of the leadership that they realized that the more you go higher levels, the more you're working with people, right? And depending on what type of leader that person was carrot on a stick, or deciding, what, I need to influence people. Not all of them are direct reports to me. I might be able to get away with carrot and a stick type of behavior when I'm dealing with direct reports, but I also have to influence decision makers, my other executive directors, my VPs. So how do I go about doing that? And that's where they would hire executive coaches. Back in the days, 20 years ago, executive coaching was that hidden tool that executives would use in order to work with somebody to be able to learn soft skills. But in reality, what we're seeing with everything that we have been dealing in the workplace, soft skills are very much needed. And what I say about the soft skills is that they're not very soft in the aspect that it is not something very easy to learn. Soft skills, it's about learning psychology. It's about understanding anthropology. It's about understanding sociology. How not only the individual, but how is it that that individual transforms and influences society, a group of people, in the society? And the society could be the company. And how is it that that person will influence others based on the way that they're acting, and understanding that, and understanding the core pieces of humanity of how is it that people have evolved through life, right? So that's why I'm saying that it's not a soft as you would think. And then a lot of companies would say, well, we're going to do a training in conflict management in an hour.
Sorry.
And they think that by giving them one skill here and there, they're going to be able to resolve any conflict. And that is what I'm talking about, that it is not true.
Yeah. Because, from that perspective, what you're talking about there is, and sorry, I was laughing at that because I understand the absurdity of, okay, here's the switch, let's flick the switch and everything's going to be better.
Exactly. And the soft skills are essential skills, are very important skills. And that's why the article, the chapter, it's about that, and putting the little butter in there.
Yeah.
That it's essential. It is an essential part of that human being in leadership. And when I'm talking about leadership, I'm not only talking about the leaders on the higher level of the organization. We're talking about everybody, because everybody can be a leader.
Yes.
And that is how my father would empower his employees to be leaders at any level. Therefore, they're able to make decisions that could save the company money, instead of waiting to trickle to the higher levels until they decide whether if it's worth it or not. Who will know better the company? Somebody that is in the trenches working on the field, or somebody that is doing the bookkeeping or accounting or financing or checking out the strategy.
I love that about in the way you're describing your father there. It was encouraging others. Empowering was the word that you used, and empowering others to do that. From that perspective, again, when we're talking about conflict management, when we drill it down, it's two people interacting in a way that's probably not the most beneficial. To change that, as you mentioned before, and I summarize that as, you can't flick a switch. The people have got to change. And I've noticed in the organizations that I work with, there's been a number of people where, it's much as you can point it out right in front of their face, that belief system of that, as you said, the personality, they believe their personality, that it's just this way and that's the only way. That's not going to change overnight, as you were talking about. So how do you help people be aware that is something that needs to change? It starts with you. It's not the organization. It's not the people. But it's how we perceive our personalities, our individual personalities.
Well, sometimes it starts by people approaching me and looking for me and saying, you know what, my assessment 360 that they did at work, it's saying this and that. And I need to change, because they already told me that if I don't change, I'm not going to continue to be in the job. It could be an assessment. It could be realizing that they're not getting the best out of their employees. It could be that they're thinking that they're creating a situation to create an outcome, and the way that the impact is it's going up from them, it's not exactly what they're wishing that it could be. So it could be many different ways of how people would approach me and say, I need help with this. Or it could be somebody else in their leadership looking for somebody to tame this person that is very aggressive.
Yeah. Because you
Right?
talk about
So
that in it's the awareness is the key to transformation. Becoming aware. Is that, that's crucial, isn't it?
it is crucial because, it could be awareness that are in a very subconscious level.
Mm.
It could be awareness that are from a cultural standpoint.
Mm.
It could be awareness of how you were raised.
Mm.
Right? And the way that I help individuals to bring that about and make sense out of it, then that is where there's room. There's room because they realize that perhaps it wasn't their saying, or it wasn't their ways that they wanted to be, but it was the way that they were raised. And they're hypnotized because they're constantly generating that behavior without even realizing.
Yeah.
It became automatic. It became part of their personality.
So from that behavior, let's move into how do we recognize the signs of conflict?
Well, from that behavior is obviously how it's creating an impact on others, right? You can deal with internal conflict that you have inside of you, but then there is conflict that would show up outside of you, and that's going to be the way that people are responding to you. So if people are responding to you in a way that it's not generating something good about the relationship or about the work that you guys are doing together, so there is a discrepancy between the communication. And when we're talking about communication, it's not only what you say.
Yeah.
It is your tonality, body language, and then what you say. Right? Communication is just not what you say. It's more than that. It's how you interact with people, your tone of voice, your body language.
Yeah. So how does
And
that?
if that,
Go ahead.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say
No.
from that perspective, because we know, or we're told, I think consciously we know that only 7% of the communication is the words we say. And then there's, tonality, and as you said, the physiology as well. And I'm having flashbacks to the movie Three Men and a Baby, where they're reading the book to the baby. It doesn't matter what you read; it's the tone of voice that you read. With.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah, how much of from that perspective, when we recognize the signs of conflict, that somehow we might be, even the way we look at people. When I was watching a thing the other day, which was a new thing for me, was that if you nod to someone, you don't nod up, because that's kind of a sign of disrespect. You actually nod down, which is a less conflictual way of doing that. Is that, from that perspective, is it also recognizing what you're contributing to escalating that conflict? Looking someone in the eyes is important, but then staring at them in a certain way can...
Well, now you're talking about the other piece of it, of what makes humans humans. We come from different cultures.
Yeah.
Right? In some cultures, making eye contact is not appropriate. So how do you help, for example, a women leader to be able to feel comfortable to do eye contact? Definitely, I have to work with that person individually in order to get to that point to be more assertive. Because whenever that person does not provide eye contact, they're not listening to that person. That person doesn't feel like it's been heard and not being taken seriously. So now we're talking that, conflict resolution and negotiation has layers and layers and layers of understanding. We're talking about individuals. We're talking about cultural stuff.
Yes.
We're talking and working with a professional like me and many others that are in this field can help you to identify what is it What is it that you need to work on in order to help you to get to where you want to get, or in order to help you to get to that awareness that would lead you to create different choices of how you respond to conflict.
Is part of that
Right?
awareness when you talk about that, because you mentioned in when you're saying I recognize the signs of conflict. Conflict usually is some sort of tension, and you mentioned that. And you mentioned that in the notes that you provided me, so thank you for that. But and you talk about it in your book. Is part of that awareness is you noticing, I'm feeling a bit of tension here? Is that one of the first signs and going, okay, I'm feeling a bit of tension here. I need to becoming aware of that tension. Then you can set yourself on a different program as opposed to what you might have intuitively or unconsciously being, doing in the past, being reactive.
Well, yeah, conflict is energy, right? It's energy.
Yeah.
And then is that energy heavy or not? Is it heavy? That means that the energy is conflicting. Something's going on in there that it's not flowing, right? It's very light. It's just a misunderstanding. The other person is not reacting to what's going on, and the other person is not taking it personally, and it's fine. But when you're feeling that situations are very heavy, that is where you have to figure it out. What's going on in there. And if it's very heavy, that's, conflict is energy. Love is energy. Conflict is energy, right? Peace is energy, right? But some of them will feel lighter than the other ones.
So what are some of the key things we can look for as far as, recognizing the signs of conflict? An individual, what are key things that they can pay attention to? Oh, that's a trigger. I need to be aware of that.
Well, this is the other thing that, companies or leaders in organizations don't realize. Sometimes I just get called whenever the fire is already going. But they don't realize that conflicts, they started a while ago.
Yeah.
That is the metaphor of the iceberg.
Yes.
When they call me is because they see the iceberg outside the water.
Yeah.
Instead of being more preventative and figuring it out that something is not going well in the relationship of certain people in the workplace, but they let it go. They think, it's just gonna go away. Tomorrow we're gonna wake up and see things differently, and everything is gonna be fine. And then days pass, and again it happens.
Yeah.
Or months pass, and again it happens.
Yeah.
But what they don't realize is that every time that it happens, it's a higher density. It's a higher energy. It's a higher energy. It's a higher energy until it gets to a point that people are upset and they scream to each other. They go violent. They go postal. You name it. And that is where they run and say, "We need a mediator. Come immediately and help out." And then I calm the situation and I say, you know what? Now that happens, let's post prevention. Let's start training people. No, we don't need that. We don't have any budget for that. We don't need that.
Yes.
And they don't realize that that's a very important thing, because that everything is comprised of human beings. And even though that people are working online, people's behaviors to one another are still filtered through the online system.
Yes.
There's been filtered through the email, right?
I noticed that completely. And even the conversation we're having now, I can feel the energy between us. And it doesn't matter that it's online, you actually do that.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how, people do think it's not the same, but it's very much, it's different. But
I have had situations that people call me, it's like, we need help, this and that. Next day things calm down and it's like, oh, it went away. We don't need anything anymore. They don't realize that is where they have to take action
when it's calm,
before it gets worse.
Well,
it's not going to go away.
Exactly. That leads to the next part that you talk about: promote open communication. How do you have that open communication? I mean, obviously when things calm down is a good time to do it, which is, what you're talking about. How do you
Well,
promote open communication?
when we're talking nowadays with diversity, equity, inclusion, right? We're
Mm,
talking about how can you create inclusive communication.
mm,
When you create inclusive communication, it builds the culture in a positive way,
yeah.
right? So communication, building pathways of communication that are positive, that are encouraging to be positive, then it builds into the culture of the organization.
Mm,
That's the other good thing about it. Anything that you do in these realms of negotiation, conflict resolution, difficult conversations, anything that you work towards that area, it creates a positive effect on the culture of the organization, because many things will happen.
mm,
People start seeing that the companies care about them.
mm,
People start seeing that indeed, if you're having policies, you're really going to abide by them if they're going to go with the culture of the organization,
yeah.
right? People are going to communicate better. They're going to start being more in fluidity
Mm,
instead of offending each other. What are the key words that you can change in order to correct somebody or help somebody in a meeting, instead
mm,
of instead of interrupting or saying something that will trigger somebody else's emotion,
mm,
right?
yeah.
So creating a culture of good communication, it's vital. It's one of those things that can be done preventative
Mm,
before everybody or something happens that people get upset. And that's when you call a mediator, right? So building that type of culture, inclusive communication, it's very important.
mm. And is there a difference in the way we're having open communication? Because this comes up a lot between men and women. Seems there's very different styles that men and women have. So, are there any techniques for better interacting in that space as well?
Well, in this side of the screen, I work a lot with women
Mm,
that they're having difficulty uh, sharing their perspectives, and sometimes the men will shut them down, will
mm,
interrupt them, will
mm,
not allow them to speak.
mm,
And it could be consciously because they're being very competitive with the other person, or it could be that that's the way they have been all the time, and nobody has to tell them anything about how they look very bad when they're interrupting somebody or they're not allowing the women to speak,
mm. So
right?
that's part of that.
So
Go ahead. Yeah.
it's part of that. It all depends on the situation that happens, right? But you
Mm,
can definitely teach techniques to women or men, and also it could be men, of how to go about very politely interrupt and interject in order to speak up, in order
mm,
to share information. But then if you're constantly having an offender constantly doing that,
mm,
then I work with them as how to have a private meeting with this person and talk to them about their behavior, and how is it that they want that behavior to change in order for them to be able to feel inclusive in the communication.
mm. Yeah, I've noticed from my perspective it's not always the same, but I've got to adjust how I communicate between men and women. I communicate differently, and so it's not always the same. It's to the individual, but generally there's a more, a different type of communication style that I have when I'm working with women as opposed to working with men, because the communication is different. And that's what I was wondering from that perspective when you're talking about promoting open communication, is part of that also having that awareness of the type of person you might be dealing with, and adjusting to that.
Yes, because obviously it all comes to a certain personality styles. There
Mm,
are personality styles that are extremely competitive.
mm,
That's why I was saying this person might be very competitive, and that is what drives this person. They're doing it very unconsciously, and they're just stopping everybody to talk because they want to compete, right?
mm,
They're probably doing it an automatic,
mm,
right? Versus you might have a women or another men that are not into competition,
Mm,
and they're the ones that are quiet all the time on meetings, and their ideas are not heard or anything like that. So
yeah.
it is how to work with these people, not only to work with people that deal with behavioral conflict very different, but then
Mm,
how to recognize what is your to go to and be able to transform yourself into the others in order to reach the goals that you want to get to.
mm. And that's where I was wondering from that perspective. Yeah, it's about you being aware of the situation sometimes, and you mentioned before, to the extreme where you might not be able to resolve a situation, but you also might be, if I'm hearing correctly, you might be in a position where you go, okay, this person has that, high competitive personality. They may not change, but I can adjust how I'm dealing with that so that we can have an interaction, get to where we need to get without having a conflict. Is that part of that?
Yeah, it could be that, or it could be having that, helping them to have that conversation with that person,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
And not take it personal.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Often,
because it could be that the person is doing it on purpose, or it could be that's their personality. They're just the way that they are. They're very aggressive with
yeah,
in situations. It doesn't justify what they're doing, but perhaps it will have to be you to have that high stake conversation with the person in order to create that awareness. I have done that with women because I have seen women dealing with that more often than not,
mm,
and helping them how to go about having that conversation. And then that other person, now it's paying now it's paying attention, created awareness, and then lowering his velocity of being competitive.
is that? I mean, from that perspective, because I'm dealing with that or dealt with that recently with a board, and one of the board members really shouldn't be there. Doesn't have the skill to be there, but he was helping out as a community organization, but I noticed they get very defensive, very emotional, and have to really tiptoe around this person about how you approach things because they can very easily take offense.
Yeah.
Something that otherwise would be you going, well, what's the issue? But they're reacting, so I've had to adjust very significantly how I approach this person um, to get the results happening because they just don't have that awareness and probably never will.
Mhm. Yeah, well, that is probably when you have to bring a third neutral person, right? If, you
Okay.
know, I have worked with a lot of board directors,
Mm,
and these are well-meaning people they want to contribute in the community. They go in and work with these nonprofit organizations. They
yeah.
want to contribute, but guess what? They're also bringing, not only do they want to contribute, but they're also, some of them, not all of them, some of them are contributing because they're looking for something, a status, they're
Mm,
looking for something, right? So you have a combination of human beings coming into a board of directors,
yeah.
and all of a sudden, their noise and their agendas get so noisy that
Mm,
the purpose of the organization and why they're there together gets lost.
yes.
They forgot about why are they their board directors? What is the mission of the organization?
Mm,
And either if that person has the ability and have the ability to work with them and work through them, great. Otherwise, you have to bring a third neutral person that to have those type of conversations and to help the board to overlook.
mm,
Yes, we understand that you also have your needs and wants out of becoming a board director, but
yeah.
don't overlook the fact that this organization has this mission.
Yes.
And how can we create a win-win situation in where you are in the board, you get what you need, but you also contribute? And
Mm,
how is that going to relate to the relationship you have with the rest of your board?
yes.
Because if you don't, you're going to have to remove yourself, or they're going to have to remove you from the board, and you're not going to get to the point or to where you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're talking about there is you're proactively resolving conflicts by bringing in a third party. That what are other ways that you can do that to proactively resolve the conflict?
Just by yourself, like if a person by
Either
itself.
or. If we're looking just broadly, some broad techniques that people can do.
Well, obviously be able to be aware and how to have this conversation with the person as to what is in it for them as well.
Mm-hmm.
What is their interest? Now we're talking about pieces of negotiation. What is the interest that they have in being part of the board? And say,
Mm-hmm.
you know what? I understand, based on what you're sharing, that your interest is in being part of the board because you want this and this and that. But how can you also have that while you also help the entire board in order to reach the goals of the organization?
Mm-hmm.
Because if that doesn't go together with your needs, then you don't have a space here on the board.
Mm. So from that perspective as well, from a broader side of things with people actively, just a one-on-one situation where there's they notice that there's some tension there. How does someone proactively resolve that situation in that one-on-one situation?
What do you mean? On one-on-one situation when they're talking to one another?
Yeah, just say if people are just looking for how to proactively, is it part of that recognizing that, hey, there's some tension here, maybe I just need to go and have a coffee break and come back, or
Yeah,
change
it
the
could be
tonality of
that.
my voice. Yeah.
It's like, what can you do to help untangle people? Because obviously when there's a conflict, they're in the same level of consciousness. They're unhappy, the other person is unhappy. What are the things that can be done in order to get the person out of that stage at that moment in order to have those conversations? It could be a walk, having somebody to do a walk, saying, you know what, let's break for now, let's go and take a rest or go to sleep, and let's set up a meeting during the week and we can talk more about it once you have time to think about your piece of responsibility in this situation and my piece of responsibility, because it's not one-way street here. So definitely you want to create that space and that that ability for people to start seeing things from a different perspective.
And as part of that, we're moving into that area if we're going through that process of finding common ground. And you mentioned earlier about the conflict can't be resolved at the same level that it was created. Is finding that common ground about chunking up, about looking at it from a different perspective?
It can be that. It can be the way that people will see from different perspectives, but it also can be what is of interest to them. How can you create communication that it's a collaborative communication, inclusive communication? It's so many different angles, right? So if you're the one that it's trying to create this openness in the communication and be able to help this individual to see what's going on that they're not doing right, or that that they're affecting the organization. It's how to bring this collaborative communication, for example, and say, you know what, I totally get it that you're in the verge of building your career and being part of this board. It's a value for you in many ways, and I would like to hear what is it that you want to gain out of the relationship of being in this board. Right? What are the win-wins for you? Once you listen to what they want and they're looking for, then you can talk about the needs of the organization, and then make a collaborative effort to say, you know what, I'm pretty sure that you can gain what you need while you also work with others in the organization, because everybody in this organization, it's here for the same purpose. Let's support the organization, not to forget that the main mission of the organization is this mission. And then how can everybody on the board have their own interests met at the same time that they meet the interests of the organization?
Yeah. So you're taking it from the level of the conflict to a higher purpose, as in the mission of the organization. What are we here for? what are we aiming to achieve, and then linking it back to that. Okay, let's how do we move towards that mission? Is that using
Exactly.
that?
Yeah. If
And
that would be the case, right?
yeah, and is that part of that active problem solving as well that you're talking about? That is you go, okay, the mission is let's not get bogged down in the detail of this conflict. Maybe not use those words, but go, okay, the mission is this. Let's look at how can we work together? And part of that sounds like, coming back to what your dad was talking about, it sounds like he was listening a lot to what was going on and asking questions. Is that the process that we want?
Well, that could be some of the techniques, because the more you go less into your head, into your position, or into the hot button of what is bothering with you, then you get stuck.
Yeah.
But once you start asking questions and you start opening up and making sure that you understand where the other person is coming from, then you're starting to open up those windows of opportunity to see things from a different perspective. Yeah. When you do that with the other person will be more receptive to be able to allow you into their vision and invite you in, because they don't feel attacked. Whenever you're creating communication and where the other person feels attacked or that they have to defend themselves, you're already losing that person, because that person is going to lock down and they're going to shut down and they're not going to want to communicate with you. But if you're approaching that individual by the aspects of opening up the conversation, trying to see where they're coming from, then you're going to be able to allow this person to open up. And the other thing that it can happen more often than not, they're going to be open up to see your point of view. And from that space is where you deviate.
Yeah.
Clean, good deviate.
Yeah. So it sounds like from that perspective, we're circling back to what you've coined as conflict IQ. Part of having good conflict IQ is having a good sense of your own self, to be able to go, I can actually listen to what the other person's point of view is without it. Is that where we're coming from?
Yes, exactly. That's another piece of the puzzle of how do you put yourself into the other person's shoes. But if you don't have the ability to overcome yourself, you're not going to be able to put yourself in the other person's shoes. Yeah,
I love that. We've talked for a while now. I know we're running close to the end. Is there something from that perspective, a key takeaway that you'd want from the book? And we'll put the link to the book in the previous, and also your previous interview, in the show notes, so people can grab the book. But what would be some key takeaway that you'd want them to have from this? We could go for another hour, but easily. But
yeah,
I think we need
takeaway. Yeah, the key takeaway that I want people to know, and leaders to embrace, is that conflict is not something to be afraid of. It's something that you can lean in and learn from it if you learn how to transform it.
Yeah.
And when that happens, you become an individual that people want to follow because of good reasons. And we need good role models to enact ways of how to resolve better conflict in everywhere, in the workplace and in the world.
Yeah.
Because we don't have those. We have, our media shows too much fighting, violent, and all that. And we need more of that. We need to create more leaders and more people around us that have that ability to inspire others of how to resolve conflict from a peace building space, from a restorative place and transformative matter, right? And how to transform people. So I think that would be the key. And one of the things that I do, because I love these works so much, that every other Monday, I put myself in a Zoom for 45 minutes and I provide micro learnings.
Okay.
People chime in, I provide micro learnings, and then I leave another 15 minutes for people to ask questions, just like you're asking. Hey, by the way, I am dealing with this situation at work. What can I do? And then I coach people right in there, so that people can have an opportunity to feel and see the work that I do, and for them to experience themselves with that openness of consciousness. with that ability to see things from a different standpoint or a different light. So it's on my website in the university side of it. It is free. People can come in for free and they can experience that. Micro learnings, a little bit of learning, and then that. The other thing is that, I do speak a lot. And if companies or anybody would like me to come in and talk to their groups, I love to do that. I'm here to create value out of the work that I'm doing for other people as well. And if they invite me over to have a talk and talk about, a lunch and learn, or talk to a group of leaders that they know of, please contact me and I can definitely do that as well.
I love that. We'll put those details in the show notes as well about the micro learnings and the speaking, and put that in those links there as well. Yvette, it's been wonderful chatting with you as always. I said could chat for hours, so we'll have to do another chat sometime again in the future. But thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being part of the Share.care community and helping people around the world prosper. You're creating a bigger pie for everyone to share. The more people contributing to the world being a better place, the better the world becomes for others and for you.